Hello, I'm Jeremy Hickerson, and I'm going to read a selection from my literary memoir entitled Now, Then, and Then, talking about a time when Dave Park and I drove to Utah to visit his mom, who was there in a care facility. Dave has been my friend for over 40 years, and I write in my book that he's my only friend, meaning that we have taken time to get together for no other particular purpose other than just to get together. We don't work at the same job. We don't even live in the same city. He lives in Seattle, and I've lived in Portland, Oregon, and now in Salem, Oregon. And that's been true since a year after high school. So we've gone out of our way to get together and keep in touch over the years, partly because of our shared love for music and the fact that we both play guitar. And Dave was something of a mentor to me, as he was a lot better guitarist than I was. Anyway, we drove to Utah to visit his mom. She was in a care facility there. And I had brought along Zadie Smith's White Teeth, which features largely in this selection. And there's a massive spoiler, several massive spoilers to Zadie Smith's plot here. Hopefully that book is old enough that this won't matter. She didn't even like the book herself, so I doubt she would care. Dave and I have just arrived in St. George, Utah. It's 10:30 p.m. After locating the Motel 6, we unloaded the car quickly and went to bed, both of us exhausted from being on the road since 8:30 that morning. We had stopped only for gas in the afternoon, and then an hour for dinner at a truck stop along the freeway. The next morning I got up at 7, showered, dressed, and left a note for Dave saying I'd be at the Denny's down the street and would eat and then read until he arrived. I knew he would be a while, since he worked evenings and was used to getting up later in the day. Denny's was mostly empty when I walked in. I found a seat, then ordered oatmeal and a glass of grapefruit juice, along with black coffee. So far on the trip I had been eating rich food like French toast and sausage, hamburgers and fries. I knew I had to eat more healthily during the week we were in St. George. Of course, I still put brown sugar and a little butter on my oatmeal before pouring in just the right amount of milk, not so much as to make it cold and runny, but enough to keep it from being dry. When I finished eating, I picked up White Teeth and started reading where I had left off. I had thoroughly enjoyed the first half of the book and had marveled at how Zadie Smith developed the friendship between Archie and his World War II buddy Samad Iqbal. Smith had been in her early 20s when she wrote this. It was amazing to me that she had possessed such knowledge of humanity and human relationships. I had been blown away by Archie's surprising change of character right at the end of the section, when he and Samad argue over the fate of the Nazi they had captured, a French scientist and war criminal with an unusual medical condition that causes him to weep blood-red tears. Samad wants to kill the Nazi outright and mocks Archie for being unwilling to take action. It's only fitting that Archie should kill him, Samad says. The war is Archie's fight, not Samad's. Archie takes up the challenge and leads the prisoner off at gunpoint. Samad hears a gunshot and Archie comes back, limping and bleeding. But now, as I read, the story had begun to focus on Archie's and Samad's children and had become a well-told but fairly predictable teen drama. Zadie Smith herself had said that she wasn't happy with this book. It was her first novel, and to this day she had never been able to go back and read any of it. I read for over an hour. I had my pen and notebook with me, but I couldn't bring myself to try to write. At 9:30, Dave showed up. He asked what I had had for breakfast and then ordered the same thing, except he added blueberries to the oatmeal. I would have added raisins if they had had them, but blueberries were just plain wrong because of the texture. Raisins are hard, but blueberries are squishy. At the same time, I was glad Dave was eating something healthy, and the blueberries actually made it even healthier. His girlfriend had spoken to me on the phone and made me promise to keep an eye on what he was eating and not let him eat junk food the whole time, which she suspected he was likely to do. I didn't know how I could enforce this or whether I would even feel right about nagging him, but I had promised her. When Dave had finished breakfast, he was ready to visit his mom. She was staying at a care facility close to our hotel. I told him I'd be out for the day and would meet him back at the motel at 5. This is how I had envisioned the week in Utah. Dave would visit his mom. I'd go sit in a coffee shop and read and write. We might both go to see her for a bit, or maybe explore the town together at some point. He hadn't seen her since Christmas and had some concerns about her condition, so I thought he'd initially want to meet her by himself. But as soon as I spoke the words and saw his reaction, I knew this wouldn't work. "Do you want me to come along?" I said when I saw his look of disappointment. "Could you? At least for the first visit?" My heart sank as my plans for the trip went out the window. But I knew Dave would do the same for me in an instant and with enthusiasm. In fact, it would have never occurred to him not to come with me. We got in the car and drove to the care facility. It turned out to be close by, walking distance if you didn't mind a long walk. And then I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. You'll have to read the book to get those 5 or 6 pages of time with his mom. I should also mention that I was out of work, or expecting to be out of work. We went to Utah in the spring of 2018, the month of April, and I had been told that my job would end the coming August. I think at the beginning of August. It wasn't clear, so I had 3 months or 4 perhaps. And so I was looking for work and had applied to several jobs at Western Oregon University where I had worked in the past. My current job was at Oregon State University where I had been for 13 years, working as a computer programmer. We left the care facility. We left about 3 p.m. and told her we'd be back after dinner. Instead of going straight to the motel, we stopped at Burger King for some lunch. While we were waiting for our food, I went out to the parking lot to call Mike Illis about the 2 jobs I had applied for at Western Oregon University. June had told me how nice he had been when he called, wanting to talk to me while Dave and I were on the road. Mike had been a computer science major and a student worker in our department when I had worked at Western before, more than a decade earlier. While I was there, he had graduated and gotten a permanent position. I had helped him a few times with some of the database code on projects he was working on. When I left in 2005, he had come to my going away lunch at the Mexican restaurant down the street and given me a ride back to the office afterward. Not everyone takes the time to come to these send-offs, and I was touched that he had done it for me. Now he was Assistant Director of Computing Services. I wasn't surprised by Mike's success during the past years. He had the rare combination of excellent technical ability and extremely good people skills. I dialed his number, he picked up, we talked for a few minutes, and set up 2 job interviews for the following week. If only I could get one of those jobs. It would solve so many problems, including my biggest worry, which was Maddie's education. She would be a junior next year. I didn't want her to have to miss a term or 2 because we couldn't afford college anymore. I could take out a loan as a parent so she wouldn't have debt, but that would be a hassle. I didn't want debt either, but eventually I'd get work and be able to pay it back. If Western didn't hire me, I'd be scrambling around, maybe getting back into consulting with its constantly changing work environment and high pressure. I'd have pressure at Western, too. They'd expect a lot from me and I'd have to deliver. I had left with a good reputation as someone who could be depended on. This had continued during the years I'd worked with them while at Oregon State, but was it totally deserved? Maybe I had been luckier than I should have been. Maybe I had gotten lazy the last few years and couldn't dig in on a project the way I used to. But I knew the people at Western. I had known them for years. That was everything to me. It took so long to get comfortable in a new workplace. On consulting jobs, this never happened. You had to make the best of things because you weren't around long enough to get settled in. When Dave and I finished eating our Whoppers, he went back to the motel to nap for a few hours. I got my notebook and pen in case I felt motivated to write, along with white teeth, and walked to the coffee shop. I ended up reading the whole time. That evening, we went back to visit Dave's mom. When we went, we brought my 12-string guitar. We arrived about 6 p.m., and after visiting for a bit, Dave took the guitar out of the case and began to play. It didn't matter that his mom couldn't hear the music. She enjoyed it all the same. Maybe just seeing him hold the guitar, pick and strum, nod his head, and tap his foot was enough to bring back the memory of what she had seen and heard so many times before. Perhaps her mind filled in the missing sound. We stayed and visited until 10 p.m. As Charlene told her stories, I surreptitiously recorded several videos of her on my Android phone. I hadn't brought it along to use as a phone. I didn't even have a wireless plan for it. I brought it for the jazz chord charts in the iReal Pro app that I had installed. I used my flip phone for calls, but it was handy that I had the Android along. Before the evening was over, I had recorded 5 short videos, and I knew Dave would want to see these later, for the memory of the visit and also for all the interesting family history his mom was telling us. After we left, we ate a late dinner and got back to the motel at 11:30. The next morning, I again went to breakfast at Denny's, and Dave joined me a couple hours later. He had the oatmeal again, staying on the straight and narrow. I had finished reading White Teeth just before he got there. In spite of the cliché young adult feel of the second half of the book, Smith had saved her novel with a great ending that referenced the first part of the story and tied everything together. The novel ends with a big press conference to kick off a scientific experiment in mouse genetics with big human implications, the life's work of Marcus Chalfin, the father of a classmate of Archie's daughter, Erie. Both Erie and Samad's son, Magid, have helped Marcus on the project, Magid in a public relations and legal role, and Erie as an administrative assistant. Milat, Magid's twin brother, has radicalized himself against the West and sees the press conference as the perfect opportunity for an act of terrorism. Archie, Samad, and their families are all in attendance. Marcus introduces his mentor, an elderly French scientist. The mentor, overcome by emotion and pride at seeing his lifelong dream realized, sheds a few tears. Red tears. Wait, I thought as I read, was that the Nazi Archie was supposed to have killed? If so, I'd have to think differently about the second half of the book and about Archie. I wanted to turn back and check, but I couldn't drop everything right in the middle of the decisive action scene. Archie had vaguely recognized the French scientist's name, and now remembers the red tears. Samad does too and starts cussing out Archie in every way possible for not killing the Nazi, at the same time realizing that this is the ultimate, the greatest gift. Now he and Archie will have something to talk about for the next 40 years. Milat comes out of the crowd and reaches for his gun. Archie sees this, intercepts him, and takes the bullet in the leg, just like before, saving the Nazi scientist once again. Since Archie didn't really kill the Nazi, that changed everything, because now Archie didn't take action. His basic character didn't change, and the entire second part of the book, the young adult drama that I had hated, was necessary to set up this final scene. But was it really necessary? Or was Smith just manipulating the plot to justify the young adult part? Surely she didn't have to take the story off in another direction for so long. There must have been a more elegant way to do it. I mulled this over and couldn't answer one way or the other. It had definitely worked, at least once you got to the ending. There was no denying that. Now that I had finished the scene, I had to make sure the Nazi's name was the same as the mentor, even with the red tears reference. After paging through the book, I found the section where Archie and Samad had captured him. Yes, the name was the same. Zadie Smith had set this up very cleverly indeed. After the press conference scene, the story went to a flashback of the Nazi scientist's killing, where Archie, for the first time, flips a coin to make a decision, to decide the scientist's fate. The Nazi had grabbed the gun when Archie set it down to flip the coin, and had shot Archie in the leg. "Why'd you have to do that?" Archie said, showing him the coin, which had come up tails, meaning the Nazi could live. The coin flip had been Archie's trademark throughout the novel, his way of making decisions. In the opening pages, he had used it to decide to commit suicide. With this ending, Smith had given new meaning to that coin flip. The ending was good enough that I made myself wait a few minutes before picking up On Beauty, another Zadie Smith novel I had brought along, even though the whole time I was slogging through the second half of White Teeth I had wanted to drop it in favor of On Beauty, which I expected would be a better novel. It would be wrong to immediately fill my mind with something new without first savoring the impact and implications of Smith's surprising yet justifiable conclusion. After sufficient time had passed for me not to feel like I was violating the spirit of the journey I had just been on, though I had hated the last part of it until the great ending, I began reading On Beauty. I was immediately impressed by the growth in Smith's writing. She wasn't following someone else's idea of what a story should be. She was telling it her own way. She began the book with a whole chapter of email exchanges, for instance. But her freedom wasn't limited to this sort of device. Even in conventional narrative, the things she chose to focus on made the story uniquely hers. For the rest of the week, Dave and I kept the same routine. Breakfast at Denny's, visit his mom until the afternoon, and then have a late lunch, hang out at Barnes & Noble in the mall for a couple of hours, then back to the care facility for an evening visit, dinner at 10 p.m. or later, then sleep. We discovered Costa Vida and had lunch there several times. It was similar to Chipotle, but a lot better. The food had much more flavor and variety, while Chipotle always seemed bland to me. When we were at Costa Vida, they played a lot of 80s music in the background. Several times, Dave commented on a song, and the music got him thinking of other 80s songs. He kept trying to remember the first big hit by the Human League. At Barnes & Noble, Dave bought an early short story collection by George R.R. Martin. He had read a small part of it years ago. I had brought along Zadie Smith's On Beauty and read it for a while, but since I was at a bookstore, I briefly checked out Stieg Larsson's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I wanted to see if it would live up to the hype, although the hype in America was due to the movies, not the book. But I knew Nausgaard liked Larsson's writing. I read the opening chapter and was impressed. The style was spare, yet documentary-like in its detail, and immediately took you into a dark, surprising, and somewhat dreary world. In this case, dreary was good. It gave the story that authentic edge. I put the book back on the shelf and picked up On Beauty. Smith was building a complex story about betrayal and familial bonds. I couldn't put it down. Thank you for listening and watching. Please click like if you want to. It helps my channel. And if you like this, you're also welcome to subscribe. There will be more, perhaps literary readings, reviews of other things, music, and all of life is the way I see things on this channel and in my novel. Thank you again.